What's going on, guys, and welcome to episode 567 of #AskGSM here today for October 9th, 2024. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. I mentioned this last week, I'll mention it again. Yesterday marking 11 years to the day of Wrestle Rant Radio on the airwaves. I actually started the show on a Tuesday, and yesterday was a Tuesday. We followed the same calendar in 2024 as 2013, so that's why. But support the show, support the brand, support what I do by buying an all-new Wrestle Rant t-shirt available right now on Pro Wrestling Tees /Wrestle Rant Radio, or ProWrestlingTees.com, not just Pro Wrestling Tees. Pro Wrestling Tees' website, ProWrestlingTees.com /Wrestle Rant, not Wrestle Rant Radio, just Wrestle Rant. Buy the first shirt up now. Hoping to have more designs go up at some point. The link is down below in the description box. It's also on WrestleRant.com. And when it's not at the top of the videos of the description box of most of the videos going forward, it will be in the description box. Maybe just not at the top. It will be at the top for a while, for the next maybe week or two. But you can always find the link on my website, WrestleRant.com. It's at the top of the page. Go just click on the store. It'll direct you immediately to ProWrestlingTees.com /WrestleRant. So, like I said, support the show, support the brand, support what I do by buying a t-shirt today. And listen, if I don't say so myself, I think it's a pretty cool design. So, like I said, hope to have more designs up in the future of Wrestle Rant Radio shirt. Maybe a Halloween design before October is through. Question mark, we'll see. I would greatly appreciate the support. If you want to send in a question to this show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook.com /Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a question on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And be sure to also drop a question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. So let's get into it here. Jordan B. from YouTube had the first question. They asked, which main roster WWE superstar that has never competed in TNA would you like to see cross the line over to the Impact Zone because of the WWE TNA working relationship? For me, it would be Apollo Crews, The Miz, Chad Gable, Ivy Nile, the Creed Brothers, Dragon Lee, Rey Mysterio, and Natalya. All good picks. I think it would be cooler. I mean, some of the names that you mentioned, I think it would be cooler to see some of the long-standing WWE stars in the TNA Impact Zone. As you said, it's not really the Impact Zone anymore, is it? I don't know. But people like a Randy Orton or a Rey Mysterio or The Miz, because they've never really been any. I mean, Rey Mysterio has obviously been outside of WWE. He was actually on the first All In show, right? Or no, he was going to be. No, wait, he was. I think he was on All In, was Rey Mysterio. I'm pretty sure he was in the main event. So we've seen him interact with the Bucks. He's been in New Japan, Lucha Underground, and obviously he was doing stuff in WCW before coming to WWE too. But I always associate Rey Mysterio, for how long he's been there on and off, with being a WWE guy. So seeing someone like him, a Randy Orton, I know he's obviously been in TNA before, but AJ Styles. I mean, honestly, more over than any person that you mentioned, I want to see him back in TNA. One, just to hear that fucking theme song again, Get Ready to Fly. And two, because I feel like it would be a great visual to see AJ of 2024 back where it all started for him. And maybe he'll go into the Hall of Fame. I mean, selfishly, I want him to have a match. I want to see him have a match in TNA, maybe against like a Josh Alexander or someone like that. That is probably not going to happen. But a TNA Hall of Fame induction isn't completely out of the realm of possibility. But regardless, someone like an AJ or an Orton, a Mysterio, for someone that's never been over to TNA before, like a Natalya, honestly, even when Natalya's contract was up, I really don't give two shits about Natalya either way, personally. But if she were to have left WWE earlier on this year, I think it would have been cool to see her in TNA. I think she could lend a lot of experience to that division. They have a lot of great women in TNA, so she could work with all of them, go after the Knockouts Championship or do whatever. And even just for a small excursion, it would be cool to see Natalya in TNA. She ain't doing shit now being back in WWE. She's had a couple matches against the Pure Fusion Collective and has won, I think, most of them, if not all of them. I'm already back to not giving a shit about Natalya, so seeing her in TNA for a little while would be cool. I don't think the WWE TNA working relationship will ever expand to the main roster, just because the main roster doesn't need TNA guys on the main roster, and TNA probably, if you use Natalya in TNA, she probably won't even be able to lose a match. I mean, they're not even putting the Trick Williamses and the Ethan Pages, who's already been in TNA, but, people like that in TNA. I mean, they had Wesley there for a little while, but for the most part, it's the undercard people in NXT because they don't want their bigger people going to TNA and losing. And even then, they probably just, I guess this doesn't make sense. I don't know. So I don't see that happening. But yeah, any of the long-standing WWE superstars, a John Cena in TNA would be fucking crazy. Like, as part of this retirement tour, I know Joe Hendry has said, like, oh, I want to face John Cena, and that would be cool. Obviously Joe Hendry would go to WWE. He would probably sign with WWE before Cena's through in the ring by late next year. Joe Hendry will probably be WWE bound by that point, I would have to think. But regardless, how fucking cool would it be as part of that retirement tour for John Cena, kind of like Daniel Bryan did. And granted, I mean, it's kind of the equivalent. When Daniel Bryan, he's currently winding down, Bryan Danielson, whatever. He's winding down right now. But in the last year of his active in-ring career, he's obviously had a lot of matches in AEW. But he's also had a number of matches in CMLL, New Japan, and even Ring of Honor. He was in action at Final Battle last year, which a lot of people forget about, back to his old stomping grounds in Ring of Honor. So it would be cool if, John Cena, I mean, those are all companies that AEW works with. WWE doesn't really work with a lot of companies like that. I mean, they work with fucking Noah. I don't see John Cena going to Noah, but, listen, a John Cena TNA match, WWE doesn't really get any business out of that because it's a TNA production. But that would just be fucking cool. John Cena in action in a TNA ring. Imagine if they still had the 6-sided ring. That would be quite the visual. John Cena in TNA would have been fucking crazy. Too bad they weren't working with TNA back in like 2010 when John Cena got fired. How many times has John Cena been fired, by the way, on the main roster in kayfabe? It would have been cool like with Punk. I mean, around that same time period, Punk also left the company and said he would go to Ring of Honor or New Japan, two things of which he did not do. He showed up at Comic-Con and like an indie show, but it would have been cool to see like a Punk or a John Cena going to the Impact Zone at that point. That would have been fucking sick. Anyway, Jordan's next question. If WWE does grant Goldberg's request for a retirement match, who would you book to be Goldberg's opponent? For me, it's either Braun Breaker or Big E if he ever gets cleared to wrestle again. I don't think Big E is going to wrestle again, and if he does, I don't think it'll be anytime soon. And if that Goldberg match happens, it will be probably within the next 6 months. I don't think they're going to hold off until Big E comes back. So, yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned Big E because, like, Big E's always looked up to Goldberg and the big meaty men slap and meat thing. I was hoping for a Big E Goldberg match a few years ago when Big E was WWE champion. I was probably petitioning for that match. It didn't happen. I think I was hoping for that match at WrestleMania, actually, WrestleMania 38, because there was no obvious opponent for Big E, and now we know why. They had no plans for Big E to go on to WrestleMania as WWE champion. But that would have been a cool match, Big E and Goldberg, and Big E got hurt anyway, so it never really happened. I don't know if it would have happened if Big E never got hurt. I don't think it would have. But still, Big E's not a bad choice. I mean, Gunther, they literally just flat out fucking teased at Bad Blood. So I don't really need to see Goldberg go on to have another 2 or 3 matches. I think one would suffice. A lot of people would tell you no more matches, which I have said in the past as well. But listen, if it's done right in the Triple H era, we have not seen a Goldberg run or a Goldberg match. I mean, I've said before, like, it's comical how Goldberg, every time he comes back, it's for a fucking championship. It doesn't need to be for a title. He can be an undercard attraction. The thing with Gunther is that if they do that match, it will probably be for the World Heavyweight Championship. But you know what? If Gunther just kills him, Goldberg does not win, and they could do that match maybe at like a Saturday night's main event, or if it's Survivor Series. I heard Punk was the plan for Survivor Series, so maybe not there. But like a Survivor Series or a Saturday night's main event, the Rumble might be too far away. That's in like 4 months. I would probably get the Goldberg thing over with a lot sooner than that. Do not do it at WrestleMania. Let's just put it that way. Do not do it at WrestleMania. I'd be okay with that. So either Gunther, which they just teased, or Braun Breaker. I think he's probably the best choice. Gunther doesn't really gain anything from beating Goldberg. Braun Breaker, I think, would. Braun Breaker is still early on in his main roster run. He's already been the Intercontinental Champion. He sent Ricochet packing in kayfabe. He's, beaten in he beat Sami Zayn in that great main event on Raw in that 2 out of 3 falls match a couple of months ago. So he has a number of wins under his belt. Former NXT champion, NXT tag team champion. He's got credibility. But I think beating a bona fide, not even bona fide, a just surefire Hall of Famer, he's already in the Hall of Fame, is Goldberg, I think would be really, really cool. And I think it would benefit Braun to have said, listen, I retired Bill Goldberg. A guy that Goldberg has said in interviews that he's close with. He's close with Braun. Braun's helped his son with like football and weightlifting and stuff like that. And Goldberg has probably helped out Braun Breaker in his 3-year journey as a pro wrestler. So, yeah, I think that match would make a lot of sense. I would have done that. I mean, you could do that at Mania. I think Braun Breaker's probably getting back the Intercontinental Championship. So I don't want to see that match for the IC title at WrestleMania. I would prefer to see like Sheamus beat Braun for that belt, finally get his Mania moment, become champion, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, Braun Breaker, Goldberg, to me, if we're going to get Gunther and Goldberg. You don't do that segment of Bad Blood and then not do that match. I don't know if you do another one after that where Goldberg, I mean, he would have to win a match. I mean, I guess he doesn't have to. I just think it would be weird if he lost to Gunther and then he went on to lose to Braun Breaker too, and he should. But like, can you give him a win over a fucking, like Akira Tozawa in the meantime between those two wins or two losses? So Braun Breaker beating him. Like if Goldberg just loses all of his matches, Braun Breaker beating him doesn't really mean anything or does not mean as much. I'm not saying Goldberg should win any matches against top tier talent. I know it's a catch-22. I understand that. But yeah, I would be fine with Braun Breaker being Goldberg's final opponent if it means Braun Breaker beating him decisively and benefiting from it. Mikey does it from YouTube. Their first question was, what were your thoughts on the Bad Blood pay-per-view and what were the high and low points of the show? I thought it was a pretty good show. I will agree with the masses that the middle portion of the show is kind of dull. I thought it was good, but like Rhea and Liv kind of fell below my expectations. I thought their SummerSlam match was better. The crowd was really quiet for it, and I understand why they were quiet for Nia and Bayley. They were put in a tough spot coming off the Hell in the Cell match. And I thought they had a good match. There just wasn't really anything overly exciting about it. They also kind of fucked up a move or two, so that was kind of, embarrassing. But the match itself was fine. Liv and Rhea was good. It had its moments. There were some really cool moments, but for the most part, the crowd kind of sat on their hands, and the finish was lame. I was glad Raquel Rodriguez was there. I was happy to see her, but the way they executed it, botch or not, was kind of lame. And then Balor and Damian Priest was a good, well-wrestled match, but it felt like a Raw main event. Like, it didn't really feel special. And I think Gunther and Zayn would have been better off in that spot. The match they had on Raw this week was great, but it would have been nice to see that match without commercials. And now at this point, I'm not sure we're going to get that match again on pay-per-view. We got it on pay-per-view at WrestleMania, but for the World Heavyweight Championship, it would have been nice to get on pay-per-view. Anyway, the Triple H announcement, I'm not really a fan of it. I thought the Goldberg thing was cool, actually. I thought the way they did that was fun. The actual announcement of the Crown Jewel Championship, the more that time has passed, the more I don't like it. The belt itself is whatever, but like it's kind of like their version of the Continental, tournament or whatever, but it's not a tournament. It's just champion versus champion. The only difference between this and what we were getting with Raw versus SmackDown a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, is that there's a championship on the line, neither of their titles, and it's not brand supremacy, although it's kind of implied. Well, then that belt doesn't really mean anything. They're not going to hold that championship after Crown Jewel is over. It's not going to really come into play for future draft picks or the Mania main event, because obviously they don't know that all these months out, which people have always said, like, make the main event a Survivor Series or now Crown Jewel for like the main event at Mania for that brand. Well, they don't fucking know. WWE doesn't know until like the month out, if that, what brand is going to main event WrestleMania. And obviously, things can change. Like, let's say, for example, Raw won this match last year and they earned the Mania main event. But actually, at this point, that doesn't even matter because now we have 2 WrestleMania main events. So that doesn't even matter either, I guess. But anyway, like the 30th spot in the Rumble, I would rather that be a surprise anyway. So, I don't know. I don't really need any of that shit on the line. Just don't do the match. Just don't do it. I don't really need Gunther losing to Cody or vice versa. Will they be hurt from that loss? No. But I don't think they need to lose any matches, honestly. That they don't need to lose. I don't think Cody should lose. I don't think Braun Breaker, I'm still looking at the previous question. I don't think Gunther should lose. The Liv and Nia match, who gives a shit? Like that. Those are the matches that we might be getting yearly. When you have champion versus champion, sometimes it might work out, sometimes it won't. And I just don't give a fuck about Nia and Liv Morgan. I don't. So, anyway, the Bad Blood pay-per-view itself I thought was pretty good, if only for the closing match and specifically the opening match. Punk and McIntyre was awesome. Excellent match. The main event I also really enjoyed. I thought the crowd really made that match. They were super into Roman and Cody, and the whole, aura surrounding those two teaming was really, really well done. The actual match was fine. It was a standard tag team match, and it got better as it progressed. But, Jimmy Uso returning was awesome. I wasn't expecting that. I kind of figured The Rock would be there, and that was a great moment too. So they closed the pay-per-view on a high note What we got in the middle wasn't overly exciting, making for one of the weaker B pay-per-views all year, but I thought overall it was a fun show, and it was nice to have a B show back in the States for a change. The international shows are great, but a lot of them are like all spectacle and entrance, and we kind of got that with the main event on this show. But it was nice to kind of get back to the bare bones of like the matches and the feuds and not just appeasing to the, that crowd in that specific country. I thought it was and I guess, again, they did on this show with Cody and Roman being the main event, which I think it should have probably opened, but they couldn't close with Punk and Drew after Rock shows up in the opener, so I get it. Next question also from Mike is, should WWE turn Seth Rollins heel for fresher feuds? Listen, I think come Mania, they got to turn Rollins or Punk heel. You could do it babyface for babyface. You absolutely can. I just don't really think you need to. You have a top heel on Raw in Gunther. Okay. But who do you have for top babyfaces? We have, for the men, Priest, Rollins, and Punk. And obviously Jey Uso is also there. Sami Zayn is also there. Who do they have for heels? Braun Breaker, Gunther, McIntyre. So I guess it's kind of even on Raw right now. Of the two, I think Punk would be a better heel. Honestly, you could turn Rollins heel. He's been a babyface now for 2 years. I just want to see Rollins get more serious. We kind of saw that on Raw this week. Drop the freaking shit. I hate the party goer crap. He's been doing that for way too long. It's over, but it's just so fucking obnoxious. I don't think you have to turn him heel, and honestly, I feel like it makes more sense for Punk to go heel, and then you could say that Rollins was right about Punk all along. You can do the babyface versus babyface dynamic and have the fans choose who they want to cheer for. That's fine. I think ultimately one of them's got to go heel if the feud continues beyond Mania. And honestly, I think it should be Punk. And then you can do, we've got Punk and, that's the only match we've really gotten is Punk and Drew. But you can continue with Punk and Rollins. I don't know if we're ever going to get Punk and AJ Styles, but I feel like that would be really cool. You can do Punk and Cody Rhodes. Maybe Punk and Orton again, Punk and Owens, although Owens is a heel now. There's a fair amount of options. Punk and LA Knight, if he remains babyface, there's a lot of choices there. So, honestly, of the two, I would turn Punk, but heel Rollins, you won't get a complaint out of me either, just because he also has proven he excels in that role. Chris W. from YouTube, his first question was, he says, "Hi, Grim, hope all is well and you're doing good and having a great week so far. Last weekend I got double silver at my jiu-jitsu. Silver. Why the fuck did I say sliver? Like you're going to a sliver of a steak or something at fucking Texas Roadhouse or something. Clearly I can't read. He says, last weekend I got double silver at my jiu-jitsu tournament, and I am sore as hell because of it. How would you rank all of the first 5 Roman Reigns main event WrestleMania matches from 31 to 35 from worst to best? Well, first of all, Chris, congrats on getting double silver, not sliver. Double silver. And that wasn't a typo on your part. That was just me being an idiot and reading it wrong. I'm at your jiu-jitsu tournament. I don't know if I've talked with as much on the channel. I used to do BJJ, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and Sambo and stuff like that. I don't do it now. I just don't have the time anymore. It just wasn't as convenient. But I did it for probably about 6-7 years through high school and college and whatnot. And I really, really enjoyed it. This isn't about me, so I'll just make this quick. But they didn't have a wrestling team at my high school, which is probably for the best. I probably wouldn't have been too great at amateur wrestling. But I feel like, and I think I've mentioned this before. I think I did mention the MMA stuff a week or two ago when someone asked me about wrestling and what move I would take and blah blah blah. I prefer the submission stuff and BJJ and wearing the gi and stuff like that. So I haven't done it in a long time. I did do a few tournaments. I still have a couple of my medals, but that's awesome that you do it, obviously, and that you got double silver at your tournament. So congrats. As far as your question goes, with the first 5 Mania matches for Roman Reigns, how would I rank them? I think 31 is obviously the best. That's undeniable. The other 4, it's funny because the other 4 are fucking abysmal. It's not even close what would be number 1. So 31 is the best. The second best? Oh man, it would probably be the Drew match from 35, and even that was a distant second. I thought they had a fine match. The crowd, I was there, did not give a fuck. That was when they were doing the wave, and they also did the wave during Triple H and Batista. That was a bit slower, so I can understand that. There wasn't anything overtly exciting about Roman and Drew, But, like, I thought they had a well-worked match. The guy just came back from fucking leukemia, and people were just shitting on his match. The goodwill for Roman Reigns did not last long in 2019, let me tell you. But I thought it was a fine match, so I guess I would put that at 2 by default, because the other 3 matches were not that good. The Undertaker match is 5. That was easily the worst. I didn't think it was like, I didn't love it at the time, but I didn't think it was terrible. But when you watch it back, Taker's performance is just embarrassing. He just should not have been in that spot. And honestly, but I think I didn't hate it as much because if he retired for good at that point, I mean, the match would have sucked. But at least that final visual of him descending into the stage would have been amazing, a great way to go out, and then he came back anyway. So I got to put that last. Honestly, I don't know if I would put it any higher, even if he did actually retire, because the match just was not great. I would put that at 5, so between 3 and 4, I would probably put the Brock match at 3. The crowd just didn't give a fuck. The Triple H match I thought was fine. Maybe the Triple H match, honestly. I feel like the Triple H match, people were more into that one at 32 than the Brock match. The Brock match, people just didn't care. Like, even when Brock won, that was probably the best part about it because people weren't expecting it. Roman taking fucking like 6 F5s was just so fucking ridiculous. So I guess I would put that at 4. The Triple H match at 3. The second Brock match at 4, that is. 5 Taker, 2 Drew, and 1 Brock, the first one at WrestleMania 31. Their 38 match was honestly, or not 38. No, they had a match at 38. I think the 38 match was better than 34, but worse than 31. I was going to say their SummerSlam match, but we're talking Mania here. That SummerSlam match was probably their best match. I don't know if anything will beat that first one, but that first one, the circumstances surrounding it and the finish was just fucking perfect. But their SummerSlam match, that last man standing match, was fun though. Let's see, your second question. I was surprised by MVP's debut 2 weeks ago in AEW, and even more surprised how well done the segment was, with him verbally lacerating Prince Nana and instigating that sooner or later Swerve will eventually leave him for a new direction in success. What did you think of the segment, and do you think this new faction with MVP could be something that could help AEW in the long run? Will it help AEW in the long run? I don't think so. I mean, it could, I guess. I don't really look at this point in AEW as any one wrestler or angle or storyline or any one match as helping the company. It's going to take a lot to kind of get them back that buzz that they once had, which they do. Like, it's funny because they recapture that buzz after a lot of their pay-per-views, specifically All In, and then they just fail to capitalize on it. Like, I thought even All Out was a great show. And then Grand Slam was kind of lame. The anniversary show was kind of lame. Last night's show, the fucking Title Tuesday show, was the weakest of the bunch. That was a fucking nothing show. 2 titles on the line in one match with Emi Sakura. Ooh, who gives a shit? Challenging Mercedes Moné. How is that Title Tuesday when there's only one title match? That makes no fucking sense. Don't even call it Title Tuesday then. Anyway, my point is that they need to recapture and restore the feeling, so to speak. And I don't think one group will do anything to change that. The Moxley thing, the jury is still out on that. I like heel John Moxley, but like, I've heard that Shane isn't behind it. Good. I've had other people tell me. John Ritland gave me an idea. I won't say it here, but he was telling me what he was thinking, who it might be, and that would be fine. I don't care too much about that. It would be semi-interesting. He felt the same way when he pitched me the idea. I mean, it would be okay. I don't really give a shit about... I won't say it here because I don't want to spoil his idea if it does end up happening this weekend. My point is, that whole thing is kind of like, right now. The Hurt Business, the Hurt Syndicate, does have my attention. With MVP, now Shelton Benjamin, I think it's cool. I mean, I think it's going in a very obvious direction. Swerve is back on Saturday in Washington, as he should be. And I think he's going to decline MVP. He's going to turn him down. And then Bobby Lashley comes in instead, who reportedly is already signed, and is going to attack Swerve. So I really like Swerve being Bobby's first feud in AEW. I think that's great. That fucking intrigues me. Now, if they can put a new guy in the Hurt Syndicate that could benefit, like having the core group with MVP, Shelton, and Bobby is awesome, but you also kind of need a newer member too, like a Cedric. Cedric ain't coming in. He's already in WWE. He re-signed. He's not going anywhere. They could use someone newer to put in the group that could benefit. I mean, that guy to me is not Swerve. I think Swerve can exist on his own. He doesn't need another group to be a part of a group, unless he's the fucking leader, which even then I don't really like. I just feel like the package pairing with him and Prince Nana works so well. Why do anything differently? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put him in the group, but you could put... Who were some of the names that I think people were batting around? I'd have to look at their roster, but there were a couple people that people were bringing up, like, oh, this person would be really good in the group. I've heard EJ Nduka. I think maybe he was pitched. I mean, he hasn't really appeared in AEW TV much. Maybe Collision. I think he's been primarily on Ring of Honor TV, but he actually used to be in MLW. He's really impressive. It would be cool to see him in the group. Man, there were a couple other names I'm not thinking of right now that people were like, oh, this person would be perfect. And we're not talking like fucking Lee Johnson or someone like that. Like, at this point, the ship is sailed on a guy like that. I'm talking like someone that has real potential to be a player in this promotion. And I like Lee Johnson, no disrespect, but, you know, they've tried with him and people just don't care. So, I mean, he's probably, his ceiling is probably Ring of Honor at this point. But like an EJ Nduka who was new could work. My point is, just put someone newer in the group that could benefit, because otherwise you got like fucking near 50-year-olds in one group, and that's, I mean, it's a great group. I mean, they had great success in WWE, but you also kind of need to have someone benefit from said group as well. Swerve does not need to benefit. He doesn't really benefit from that. He's already a star. But yeah, I don't think AEW will really benefit, but I will say whatever they're doing right now, the segments they have done do have my attention. And, you know, I think it has my attention. At the very least, it has my attention. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes and what the Hurt Business, like Brisket, Hurt Business, Hurt Syndicate, whatever you want to call it, will bring to AEW. It's a new environment for them, if nothing else. Next question from Chris. He says, how would you feel about the whole Lucha Brothers contract, or how do you feel about the whole Lucha Brothers contract situation? And do you understand both parties, especially if Penta is running around, talking about merch ideas in WWE, and TK adding time to Rey Fenix's contract because of injury layoff? I mean, I guess they added time to Penta's contract too for injury-related stuff. You can't just add time for no reason. So, well, I mean, I've discussed this before. I'll keep this brief. But I think they must have added time to Penta's contract as well, because reportedly his deal, they're two separate deals. His was also up in September. And obviously, he's not a fucking free agent, so they obviously added time to his deal too. I mean, I guess he has said he's still with AEW. I guess he could become a free agent. He probably will become a free agent before Rey Fenix. Could he go to WWE on his own first, and then they can bring in Rey Fenix? Absolutely. I don't really think they need to go in as a package deal. Pentagon's awesome, so I think he could obviously do well in WWE. How well, I'm not sure. You know, keep him far away from, like, the fucking LWO. I don't mind the LWO, but, like, not every, you know, Hispanic talent needs to end up in the LWO. People have made that, you know, joke and pointed that out before. Yeah, he can go there on his own, and then Rey Fenix can come on later in. It can come in later on, rather. As far as the contract itself is concerned and TK adding injury time, if Penta is indeed saying, yeah, WWE's making merch for us, we're well on our way, that is stupid. The guy should not be opening his mouth. Whether it's Rey Fenix, it seems like it might be more Penta, I don't know. But if it is their fault, and there is no confirmation that it is, but if it is Penta's fault that people found out that he was WWE bound, or he's been talking to people saying that he's leaving AEW for WWE, yes, he kind of fucked himself on that. Now, is it within Tony Khan's right to extend the contract and get the most out of these people for what he's paying them for? Sure, I mean, you signed a 5-year deal, you want to, you know, make it back on your investment, right? By, you know, using these people for the amount of time that you assigned them for. I get that. But here's the problem, though. There's a lot of people, including them. I mean, they're not hurt right now, but here's the issue. And maybe they will be brought back to TV soon to put other people over in the next couple of months. I don't know. But here's the problem with the whole situation. If he's just paying them to be fucking petty, to not... And WWE's guilty of a lot of petty shit too, obviously. It goes both ways. But if he's just being petty so they don't go to WWE, then what's the fucking point? The money that you're paying these guys could go to someone new, go to someone that could use a raise in that company, an unsigned talent that you could be picking up and putting more time in. Like, it's just a complete waste of money. And I would say the same thing about WWE. WWE used to do the exact same thing, where they would pay people literally just to sit at home. And if they would want to leave, they'd be like, nah, you're not going anywhere. Well, if you have no fucking plans for me, if you're not even going to use me to put me over, that would be one thing. If these people like Ricky Starks was on television and you're using him to put other people over, okay, that makes sense. At least other people are benefiting, seemingly, from beating Ricky Starks on the way out. No, they're just being paid to sit at home until their contracts are up. They're getting paid for another year. You're not making back that investment. If anything, you're losing money. I don't think you would have to continue to pay them for like the remainder of their deal if you let them go early, right? I'm not a big contractual person, legal person, whatever, but if he were to grant them their early release, he's not paying them any more than what he already has, right? I mean, I just don't really, I honestly just do not see the point. If they do not want to be there, you're not going to use them. You don't have plans for these people. Why the fuck would you hold on to them and continue to pay these people? I'm sure there are people in AEW that could use that money, or people that aren't even signed that could use that money. That's just throwing around money. I mean, they have money now with the whole TV deal that goes into effect in a couple of months. I mean, Tony Khan's already a fucking billionaire or whatever, but, he's going to have an abundance more of money. AEW's finally profitable, and that's great. But to waste dollars and cents on people who don't want to be there anyway, that would rather leave than sit there and collect a paycheck. If they want to collect a paycheck, hey, listen, I'm not going to complain about that. But if they're just if they want to leave and collect a paycheck elsewhere, because it's only hurting their brand value to not go to WWE immediately, then that's just shitty. That goes for WWE, that goes for AEW, that goes for TNA, and they've done it too. To me, it's just stupid. Next question, also from Chris. He asked, the NXT debut on the CW was met with a very polarizing reception. On one side, they liked how much the show flowed, and they thought the wrestling was excellent. On the other side, many people questioned the booking of many segments like the Miz TV segment, the fact that Julia lost because of Cora Jade, and how rushed and easily forgettable the main event was, despite it being for the world title. I am in the latter half, as I felt like a lot of what they did last week and on Monday's Raw. They overhyped the debut episode and tried to make it seem like it was a game changer or must-see, when I felt in the end it was the same old stuff we see before. Do you think they overhyped the premiere on the CW, and do you think they missed the mark? I mean, I don't know if it was overhyped. I mean, they did set up Julia's, title opportunity in the NXT Championship match, Punk being there. It was a big show. Was it a great show? No, I thought it was good. Honestly, you didn't mention this. I think you sent this in before the show. I thought last night's show on the CW, their second show on the CW, their other road show, which was in St. Louis or wherever the fuck it was, the Factory, I guess is the name of the building, and no, not the group from AEW, thank God, was much better. I thought last night's show was a lot better. Had a better flow, better crowd, better atmosphere. I think the smaller arenas for NXT work a lot better than running like the Allstate Arena. And they could do that shit for like the NXT PLEs, because clearly they could put people in the building for those shows. But I think the smaller arenas work really well that fit like 3,500 people. I mean, sound-wise, it sounded great. The botch to the main event was disappointing, but the overall match was fun with him and Javon Evans. The tag title match I thought was excellent. I thought the NXT North American match was really good. Really fun title change there. Tony D'Angelo, new NXT North American champion. Julia, Roxanne, Stephanie Vakira showing up. That segment was well done. What opened the show? The sexy red shit is just fucking awful. Like, that was easily the worst part of the show. What was the beginning part? I'm trying to think. Did they open with a match? I don't... And honestly, now it's going to bother me. What the fuck did they open the show with last night? I'm looking it up now. I'm looking back at my review because I honestly do not remember. But I just remember it being a very good show. My memory is just... Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's shit. Oh, the Trick Williams, that's what it was. The women tag team match was fine. The Trick Williams, Jey Uso, Wes Lee segment wasn't really anything special, but they did set up Wes Lee wanting a shot at the NXT Championship. So, yeah, no, I thought overall it was a fun show. I enjoyed the NXT second show a lot more than I did the first one. The first one was not great. I don't know if it was overhyped, but it was underwhelming. It was underwhelming. Like, the NXT title changing hands was cool, but like the match itself wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Punk being there was cool, but again, nothing really special even happened. It's not like Drew showed up and laid out Punk before Hell in the Cell. That didn't happen either. So, it was fine. I thought this week's show was actually a lot better. And again, they don't have to run arenas every week. I think that would get old really quickly. And they need to have their developmental people on the show. Like, if you noticed the last 2 weeks, it kind of felt like a 2-week mini PLE. Like Halloween Havoc does when they make it a TV special. That's basically like a, on TV, it's like a mini PLE. Like, I think it was, was the Great American Bash like a TV special this year? I think it was. And they make those shows feel bigger. I think it was week 1, week 2. That's kind of like what this felt like. You notice they didn't have a lot of developmental matches in the last 2 weeks. You didn't see fucking Brinley Priest, or whatever her name is, Brinley Reese on the card. You didn't see Izzy Dame out there, because that's not what those people want to see. They want to see fucking Randy Orton and Jey Uso and Bianca and Jade. and some of the bigger stars in NXT. You can't go on the road every week because those people don't want to see that developmental shit, and you need that developmental shit, unfortunately. It's a developmental show. It's a developmental brand. But, I think once in a while for shows like this, for the special shows, non-PLEs, it's good to get out of their usual atmosphere because I think the talent really benefits and the show really benefits from that added energy as well. No L from Facebook. They asked, since we're in the spooky season, what would be your top 5 horror movies of all time? That's a good question. I think I've definitely answered this before. Every year I kind of talk about my favorite horror movies. I mean, they're not horror movies, but I've always really enjoyed the Friday the 13th stuff, the Halloween movies. I answered this a couple weeks ago from John Ritland. Shout out to John. I'll get to his questions in a little bit. As far as the movies I'll watch every year, I watched Smile for the first time a couple of months ago. I don't think John liked that one. I actually thought that was pretty good. I thought that was really well done. I'm just not a horror fan. I'm just not. I like more of the thrillers and the slashers than I do horror. Shout out to John again. He gave me his digital code for, what's it called? Midsummer, whatever. And I didn't love it. I mean, it was a well done movie, but it just kind of freaked me the fuck out. I just don't like movies like that. Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite horror movie unless we're talking, like Friday the 13th and stuff like that. Predator and Alien. Is that a horror movie? I guess, right? I thought Alien. I watched that for the first time about a year ago. Alien and Alien 2, and those were great flicks. I'm sure there's more I'm not thinking of. I mean, I've seen a fair amount of horror movies, a lot of which I either just don't remember or didn't really care for. I could tell you a lot of them that were fucking terrible. I could tell you that. I think my favorite one might be Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan. Again, it's a slasher, not a horror, I guess. But that might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but it's so bad I fucking love it. That is one of my favorite, probably my favorite guilty pleasure movie of all time, is Friday the 13th part 6 or 7 or 8. I forgot what it was. Jason Takes Manhattan. I fucking love that movie. No L's second question. Would you say turning Roxanne Perez heel saved her character from getting boring and almost becoming Bayley circa 2017 with the fans turning on her? Yeah, I think, it's funny because when they started to turn Roxanne earlier this year, they were actually starting to turn on Lyra before they were going to turn on Roxanne because they like Roxanne more than Lyra. And then Lyra got called up anyway, so it didn't even end up mattering. But it was interesting, though. I mean, Roxanne has really become a great heel, I think. And, I know, Christopher, he doesn't really like Roxanne in that role, and that's fine, or at least certain promos that she's cut. And she's not always great in the mic, but she's really evolved her character to a certain degree where she feels fresh again. She's always been great in the ring. She kills it as the champion in the ring with these matches and title defenses and whatnot. But I think the character development specifically in her promos was really her biggest weak point for a while, and she's improved upon that tremendously. So, yeah, I think you would have come to a point, if Roxanne was still champion now as a babyface, I do feel like people would have turned on her. I feel like she would have had to turn heel. It would have been like Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker, I think he kind of started out as a heel in NXT. I mean, he was never really fully a heel early on. He was mostly a babyface, but he was in that role for so long, people did start, and people loved that organic, badass vibe about him. But after a while, people did start to turn on him. By the time Carmelo really got over, and he was already over anyway, but people started to kind of embrace Carmelo as a babyface. They had to turn Braun Breaker heel, and I thought he did really well in that role too. So, and now we're seeing that currently on the Raw roster with him as a heel. So yeah, I think Roxanne is really good in her role. Would the fans have turned on her in NXT? I think so. I think on the main roster, if she had been brought up before, then she would have been fine. But in NXT, they definitely would have turned on her. I think Bayley, same thing. Honestly, Bayley was always super over as a babyface in NXT. But if she was there any longer than she was, they absolutely would have turned on her. That's just the way it works sometimes because people get sick and fans are fickle. They get sick of the same thing and fans can be fickle. So that's just kind of how it works. Christopher W., his first question was from Facebook. He asked, I watched Bad Blood on Saturday solely for the Hell in a Cell match between Punk and Drew and hopeful to see if WWE can finally not play it safe and let loose. And damn it, I was not disappointed. I absolutely loved, in all caps he says, the match between Punk and Drew, and I felt it brought me back to the old Attitude Era Ruthless Aggression Hell in a Cell matches, and I actually consider it to be one of the top 5 best Hell in a Cell matches I have ever seen. And I have seen a lot of these matches. The problem is that it was the only thing on the show that I actually enjoyed, as I felt the other matches, with the exception of The Rock and Jimmy Uso returning, lacked anything memorable or worth caring for. Like the NXT debut, I feel WWE overhyped this pay-per-view with matches that felt more like they belonged on an episode of Raw or SmackDown. Did WWE deliver on only the big matches? And the other matches just kind of felt like filler. No, I said that earlier. I feel like you're right. I don't know if they overhype the show. They hype all their shows the same. It's not like it's fucking WrestleMania. It's a B-level pay-per-view. I just feel like the execution of said matches could have been better. I feel like the matches themselves could have been better. They were good. I don't think any of the matches were bad. I just feel like for a pay-per-view, I mean, one like dull match is okay. Like SummerSlam, I wasn't really a big fan of Bayley versus Nia, but it was the weakest match on the show, but it wasn't a bad match. I thought the other matches were all just really, really good to great. And with 5 matches, there is, I guess a bigger margin for error. I mean, not actually, there's less of a margin for error, because if you have more matches that aren't good, it's a worse show. But with only 5 matches, you think they would have gotten it better. I mean, they would have gotten the formula down better and whatnot. But no, I thought Liv and Rhea wasn't really, that was one of their weaker encounters. I thought Bayley and Nia was good. They didn't really have, there were a couple of weak moments and awkward spots and whatnot, but overall it was fine. It was kind of the same shit that we saw at SummerSlam. And Damian and Finn was well worked. I thought it was a solid match, but it wasn't really anything special like you said. So the biggest parts of the show, at least they bookended the show with the biggest parts, and it really was a one-match show, but I enjoyed the main event for what it was, and the ending was great too. So the middle was pretty skippable. I do agree with you on that. Your next question, what are your thoughts on Triple H's comments about color during the media scrum, and do you feel either the media scrum needs to go away or somebody else needs to do the scrums instead? Yeah, I just thought his response was bad. I just didn't agree with it. I mean, again, I saw a lot of people actually, when that clip came out about, I know the guy that asked the question, he's a great dude, and after I saw him ask the question, I wasn't watching the show live, I watched it like a good day later, I watched the media scrum like 24 hours later. When the clip went around on social media, a lot of people were shitting on him asking the question, making it like, saying that, you're making this a race thing and blah, 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 who cares, this isn't that big of a deal. And, some people I actually follow said the same thing. I just personally don't agree. And I'm not saying Triple H is racist. I'm not saying the company is currently racist and stuff like that. I don't want to, lobby terms like that around. I mean, I know MVP made some very interesting comments. I don't know if he called Triple H and the company racist, but he did throw some pretty heavy accusations that that might have been why they said no to the Hurt Business and all this other sort of shit. Obviously, we never really got Triple H's or WWE side of things as to why they didn't go forward with the Hurt Business reunion a couple of years ago. But their quote-unquote race issue isn't really about that specifically. That is a part of it. But I think the bigger thing that people have a problem with currently is the report and what people have really been bringing up. And, some things are kind of over-exaggerated, like that's not really that big of a deal. That's not really like the majority feeling that way. And maybe this isn't the majority feeling this way. But when I saw this stat, and it's not even like, it's a massive issue. It's not like a massive issue, but it could become a bigger issue if they don't pay attention to it. And it was really just Triple H's response to it more than anything that disappointed me. But what people brought up was, it's been a few different pay-per-views since the last time a singles black male performer was on the show. I know that sounds specific because like a lot of these shows have had Bianca on them and Jade competing for the tag titles. Matches that really don't mean anything, by the way. Like they hosted Bad Blood on Saturday and that's great. But like, would it have killed them to put LA Knight Andrade and Carmelo Hayes? Like, that's not a singles match, but he would have been competing for a singles championship on that show. That triple threat match belonged on that show for the United States title, and they didn't do it. We probably will get it soon, maybe even at Crown Jewel, and that would be great. But at Bad Blood, for a 5-match card, they could have squeezed that match on there, in my opinion. But, they have other... I'm not saying Apollo Crews has to be on the show, because I saw someone else tweet the other day, like, y'all complaining about this shit with black male performers not being on, and I can't wait to see, like, I'm not sitting here asking for Apollo Crews to be on the card. Like, obviously it has to make sense. Like, there is somewhere in the middle where the company and fans can meet, where they're not just happy with that. Like, I'm not saying, what they give you be happy with. But I feel like you can meet in the middle there, where Triple H and company, they don't have to force on whether it be black male performers, black female performers, or really any race or gender, whatever. There should be representation, but at the same time, it should make sense. Triple H saying, again, I'm not a person of color myself, so it is difficult for me to say and whatnot. And neither is Triple H, for the record. We kind of fall in the same demographic there, I would assume, aside from him being a lot older than me. But beyond that, though, I mean, him just saying, I don't see color. Essentially, he said, I don't see color, I see talent. And in a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with that. I understand what he's saying. He's just putting on the best matches that he feels like make sense for these shows. You can't force on like, oh, we definitely need black representation and we need to put on Apollo Crews on the card. And I keep going back to Apollo. They have a far more black talent than Apollo Crews. But my point still stands, though, in that it's something that they could be paying more attention to. Maybe they should be consciously thinking, listen, some of these performers and whatnot, or some of these fans, rather, want to see more representation of their ethnicity, whatnot, on these pay-per-views. It's not something you need to force on, but organically, some of these people do deserve to be on these shows, and they just don't put them on the pay-per-views. Like Carmelo Hayes, I mean, he was at Money in the Bank, but he could have been on Bad Blood for the United States Championship. And people will watch these shows, some people will watch these shows, specifically kids and whatnot, and think, why is there no one that looks like me on these shows? And again, it's not like it's all just white males on these shows. Like, they had 2 women's matches on Bad Blood, which was good. They weren't great matches, but it was nice to have 2 women's matches on a PLE for a change. They had, obviously, a lot of different, ethnicities, a lot of Samoans in the main event there, a lot of, that was not just all white males in the main event, Rock showing up. He wasn't wrestling, obviously, but you had Roman in there with Solo and Jacob and stuff like that. And that's great. Nia Jax was also on the card. So it's not like it's all just white people on the show. Like, that would be a much bigger problem. But just because it's something that people have an issue with doesn't mean that as the COO or whatever the fucking role that Triple H has at this point, he should be out there saying, yeah, I don't see an issue with it. Like, why not even if you don't mean it, which obviously he should, if he says, oh yeah, we're working on it, and then they don't do anything, that's also a problem, I guess, obviously. But, I just don't understand the logic behind thinking, yeah, I mean, I guess he obviously just genuinely doesn't believe there's anything wrong with that. Whereas I would think, as someone who heads a company, would want to take in as much criticism as possible and use it to their benefit. If they really do not see anything wrong with that, then so be it. But why not just say, we at least listen to the criticism, we hear you, that will be something that we'd be more mindful of. Because even Cody Rhodes, that clip was resurfacing after Triple H said that in the press conference. There was that clip of Cody Rhodes saying at an AEW press scrum, one of those media press conferences a couple of years ago, him saying that I used to say I don't see color, but Brandy Rhodes said to me, who's his wife, obviously, well, if you say that, then that means you don't see my experience. And again, that's her opinion, because obviously she's black, she comes from a black family, and I feel like I honestly agree with that viewpoint. I totally see from where she's coming from. He has since changed his stance on that. That's your current fucking WWE champion. Those comments were from 5 years ago. They are not from now. Cody Rhodes specifically does an amazing job of kind of, he gives the right answers and like genuine answers, but like the right answers as well, whether you think he's phony or not. Triple H just typically a lot of the times gives the wrong answers and handles himself wrong in these situations. It's nice that they even have the press conferences to have access to Triple H to ask these questions, because God knows that Vince never did this shit previously when he was in charge. It's nice to have that accessibility, I suppose, but if they're giving bad answers, it's just making Triple H look bad. It's making the company look bad. It happened after the Rumble. It happened after this show. It happened again, I think after SummerSlam or something. He said something stupid. I mean, it's happened a lot. It's happened quite a bit. And it's something that he either needs to prepare for these questions better, knowing they're going to be asked, and not the old, oh, how great is it to be so hot, so on fire right now with WWE? How fun is it to have, to be having fun again? Does it feel like the Attitude Era? Like, those questions are just so fucking tired. They come from people that typically don't attend these things. They don't really have anything else to ask. Like, I get it. But, like, that question was easily by far the most journalistic question they asked in that entire press conference. And you're not going to ask that question to fucking Liv Morgan, obviously. It has to be asked to Triple H. But, like, I would rather Triple H just be out there himself. I don't really care to hear from in-character Liv Morgan talking about her fucking DQ loss. Like, who gives a shit? I'd rather hear Triple H respond to these questions. So, again, either prepare better, but then you have someone else do it instead. Who the fuck else would do it? The only person in his position of power that should be out there is him. Vince doesn't work there anymore. Who, Shawn Michaels? Honestly, Shawn Michaels gives better answers to this sort of shit than fucking Triple H does. When Shawn Michaels does press conferences, and I've been a part of a lot of them, you're not going to have Nick Khan out there. Like, it has to be Triple H. He's the one booking the show. He's the one with a lot of the creative power. He has to be the one answering a lot of these questions. He just has to prepare better, handle himself better, or just don't do the press conferences. Just don't do them. If you're afraid of these answers or making yourself look bad, because you fucking do, then just don't do don't have Triple H out there, but just don't do the press conference. If you're going to do a press conference, but just with Liv Morgan and Damian Priest, who I like, don't get me wrong, then it's a complete waste of time. Triple H also has to be out there answering a lot of these actual questions. And when he dodges it or gives a stupid answer, it just makes him and the whole company look bad. Again, you may not agree with why I would be disappointed in his answer. A lot of people may not agree with why people would be disappointed in that answer. Just in my have I sat here for the last 6 months saying, man, I'm so fucking pissed this company doesn't have more black representation on their show? That wasn't honestly something that personally occurred to me, but I can understand why people have an issue with it. And I'm not saying after Bad Blood, man, that show sucked because Carmelo Hayes wasn't on it, but it is something at the very least you could say, listen, I'm paying attention to it. I understand where you're coming from. See their perspective. I just think the bottom line is people want to see themselves represented on the shows. And that's not to say you need to have, because I could see people making the argument, well, when you start doing that for one race, you got to do it for everyone. And then every single pay-per-view is going to have one person of each gender, race, blah, blah, blah on every show. And obviously, that's not going to happen. And I don't even think it needs to go that far. It just needs to make more sense. There should be more representation. And even if you don't agree with it, listen to it. Try to understand it. And take in the criticism and try to do better. And I think that is something they should not put all their effort into. Like every show, we need at least one black male performer on the show. Not necessarily. It just has to make sense. But it is also something that you could be paying more attention to. And not completely dismiss the way that Triple H did during that press conference. Sorry for the long-winded answer. But your next question was, Brock Lesnar returning to WWE after 8 long years was something that was a massive deal. In 2012 he's talking about. And when he returned, it broke the internet. However, it didn't take long until people had already grown tired of the phoned-in performances and the lack of effort in the manner in which he projected. It got to the point that the IWC mocked and ridiculed Brock for his laziness and his lack of care. Yet WWE always made it seem like he was such a massive draw both in the ticket sales and in ratings. Is it true that he moved a lot of numbers when he was around champion, or when he was around, whether he was champion or not is what you're saying? And did WWE really benefit from having Brock Lesnar on the roster from 2012 to 2023, despite his lazy attitude and not showing up too often? So does Brock put in effort into his matches? As much as he should? No. I feel like that was pretty obvious in the Dean Ambrose match, specifically at WrestleMania 32, where it was pretty clear, and Ambrose said this after the fact, years later in his post-WWE interview. He made it pretty clear that Brock just didn't give a fuck. Brock doesn't care. He likes to play it safe. And that was before he went back to UFC as well, so I could see why he probably wanted to do that. It wasn't to the benefit of WWE or the match or Ambrose or anyone. It really only benefited Brock. Okay? But from 2012 to 2023, was Brock this massive ratings draw or ticket sales draw? Ratings draw? Massive? No. I don't know if any one person has been for the last 11 years. I think Rock coming back made a bigger difference. Rock's just obviously a bigger star. Brock, there's a lot you can say about Brock and the impact that he's had on WWE. Was it a negative effect? At times, yes. When they would constantly go back to putting the belt on him, yes. But you can't say that he didn't have an aura about him. And people didn't not care about Brock. I think that's unfair to say. I don't know if you said that exactly, but yeah, people got tired of his attitude and lack of care and his laziness and whatever. But every time he was in there for a match, regardless of who he faced, it felt like a big deal because he didn't wrestle all the time. He was, especially after he ended the streak, and I still don't agree with that decision to have it be him, but he did have an aura about him. Even now, if Brock were to come back, it's been over a year since we last saw him, so obviously it would be a big deal. But anytime Brock steps into the arena and his music hits, it's a big fucking deal. Even up until before he left or took time off or they didn't bring him back or whatever last year, this year, it was still like a big deal. that whenever Brock showed up, his music would go off and people would go nuts. Because he is a star. And at a time especially, I feel like it was more obvious. It was on Brock because he came back feeling like a much bigger star than he was before he left in 2004. That is true, because he did the MMA thing and kind of gained a lot of credibility, like a legitimacy from doing that. But also, it's not just a reflection on Brock, it was also a reflection on the product at the time. When he came back in 2012, Brock was just in the perfect fucking position to make a lot of money. Because WWE did not have a lot of star power at all. I don't know what they were paying those people, but if you don't really have stars, then you're not going to pay those people like stars. Obviously, they still had the John Cenas and the Ortons and Jerichos and people like that. But beyond the established stars, they didn't have a lot of young, hungry stars on the rise. They built up the Shield. Thank God they got that one right. But like a lot of the other people were kind of limited in their ceiling on that show. And Brock was, as a result, because they didn't do a great job of creating new stars, as a result, Brock felt like a much bigger star than anyone. Even the people that were already there, like the Cenas and Ortons, because they never left. So instantly, Brock feels more special than they do. And when you're not building up new stars to feel like they're on the level of Brock, then that's also an issue. I mean, for years, Brock went undefeated and only finally lost to Goldberg, which was fucking stupid. And the Goldberg stuff was, it created a buzz and it was cool. You're not creating a new star in Goldberg is the issue. They didn't really use Brock to create new stars for a long time, probably until like 2019, 2020 when he lost to Rollins, and losing to Reigns did not create a new star. It didn't really create a new star in Rollins either. I think Drew might have been, in the circumstances, killed it. Drew beating Brock was massive because he wasn't like an already made main event guy like Rollins was and Roman was. Drew had never held a world championship in WWE before. That was a massive deal. Didn't feel like it because it was inside an empty arena, but that was still a massive deal. Again, they didn't really use Brock to put over anyone else beyond that either. I mean, even when he came back in 2021, that's not really a Brock problem. I mean, partially, he probably didn't want to lose to certain people. He did lose to Bobby. Did Bobby really gain anything from beating Brock? Not really. That one time? Not really. Roman beat him. Cody did benefit, I will say. Cody did benefit from beating Brock. That felt like a big deal, specifically at SummerSlam last year. But it's far and few between. Like, Samoa Joe could have really benefited. Braun Strowman could have benefited. They were fed to Brock, and they weren't really the same after that. A lot of people could have benefited from beating Brock, and they didn't do it. So that really falls on the booking, not really on Brock himself. But still, during the period in which you're talking about, they didn't really have a whole lot of stars. So Brock felt like a lot bigger than he probably would even now. Like now, they don't even need Brock because they have enough stars to kind of make it through without Brock Lesnar. And there really isn't a whole lot you could do with Brock without having him lose like a string of matches, which you also don't want to do. You don't want to hurt whatever aura he has left. You got to find the balance there with Brock. And I think Brock is great. I'm a big Brock fan. I mean, aside from the Vince stuff, that was pretty fucking gross. But like whenever he is around, I pay more attention. I know a lot of people that pay more attention to the product because Brock is around. Brock has that legitimate vibe about him. Even though he hasn't been in the UFC for many, many years, he still brings that sense of legitimacy to everything that he does. He hits harder. He's a bigger dude. He's just a fucking beast. Legitimately, figuratively, whatever. Brock is that guy in a lot of ways. Don't need to see him as champion again. I know he's a prize fighter. I don't need to see him as champion again necessarily. But, at the same time, I do feel like there is a way to utilize Brock and he can add to the product. And I feel like Triple H kind of figured that out. The Omos match was just so fucking random because at Mania last year, because that was stuck right in the Vince era. I don't think Triple H wanted to do that match. That was just a complete waste of time. Brock and Omos, who gives a shit? Who cares? They could have used that spot for almost anyone else. Him and Bobby should have finished their feud, and Bobby should have beaten him. Plain and simple. They did not do that. That was fucking terrible that they did not do that. But I feel like, Brock wasn't really around a whole lot when Triple H was in charge, just him. Actually, I don't really think he's been around at all since Triple H was in charge. Because Vince was always kind of around, and then when Vince left earlier this year, Brock wasn't brought back for the same reason why Vince was fired. But I thought their use of Brock in the Cody feud, although it did last a little long, was good. It worked well because it put over Cody in the end, and he gave Cody that endorsement, which was cool. So I'm curious to see what they do with him when he comes back. Does WWE need Brock again? No, they don't. If Brock never comes back, I wouldn't complain. Honestly, I like Brock, but there's really not much more you can do with him that they haven't already done with him. but I feel like there is a way to utilize him that can also help the product and not just Brock himself. Your next question, let's say Doc Brown lent you the DeLorean and your mission was to travel to 3 years of pro wrestling greatness and spend a night in each one. Which of these 3 years would you go to? For me, it would be WrestleMania 3 in 1987, the January 4th, 1999 episode of Raw with Mankind winning the title, and WrestleMania 20 with Eddie and Benoit embracing at the end of the show. What would be your picks? 3 good picks. WrestleMania 3 I feel like would have been crazy to be a part of. I mean, I've answered this question before. My answers have always been Money in the Bank 2011. That would always be my number one. To be in that building for that show, that main event with Punk versus Cena, Punk leaving as champion would have been incredible. So that one specifically, One Night Stand would have been fucking wild, I feel like, inside the Hammerstein Ballroom back in 2005. The first one specifically would have been crazy. WrestleMania 17, I feel like the atmosphere for that show, that was like WWE's peak in a lot of ways. So let's say Money in the Bank 2011. Let's say WrestleMania 17, 2 of the greatest shows of all time, I know. Beyond those two, maybe I'm trying to think early on. If I'm trying to think of like a late 80s, early 90s pay-per-view, the Montreal Screwjob would have been interesting to be in attendance for that. Maybe Canadian Stampede or maybe WrestleMania 6 with Hogan and Warrior. That would have been cool in the Scotia Dome, right? In Toronto, that would have been interesting. So that's more than 3, but I mean, definitely at least WrestleMania 17 and Money in the Bank 2011 would be my undisputed top 2 picks for sure. At Johnny NBA from Twitter, what are your thoughts on a Ricky Starks, Wardlow, and Malachi Black trade for Kevin Steen? I mean, so you said Ricky Starks / Wardlow and Malachi Black. So you saying like 3 for 1? That's not really fair. Here's the thing. I mean, if they're not going to fucking use these guys, then honestly, maybe it is fair. At least Kevin Steen would be on the show. You know what I mean? Like, they're not using Ricky. Wardlow's hurt, I guess. They want to do shit with him anyway. He's just done. He's done. In AEW, he's done. And Malachi Black, he's barely on the show as it is. So maybe, honestly, maybe it is a fair trade. If you said Starks, Wardlow, and Black for Steen and Zayn, I feel like that would be more fair. WWE getting a 3-for-1 trade that benefits WWE more than it benefits AEW, I think. But again, if they're not using those people, then who gives a shit? Yeah, I guess that could work. I don't think Kevin Owens really needs to go anywhere. Him and AEW would be interesting. Him using his old Ring of Honor music would be amazing. I don't know if he would use it again. I would be in full fucking favor of that. That would be sexy. But yeah, that's a good trade. I'll say it's a good trade. I'm at Uagu91. Do you think that CM Punk, from Twitter by the way, do you think that CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre helped revitalize what Hell in a Cell is supposed to be about? Yes, they did. That was the most Hell in a Cell match I have seen in, 15 years? A long time. I mean, there's been some great Cell matches. I loved Rollins and Rhodes, but like the blood really does add a lot. It really does. Like, that was a great match. I think Rhodes and Rollins might have been better for the circumstances with Rhodes' injury and whatnot. But Punk and McIntyre honestly felt a lot like, to me, like Triple H and Batista from Vengeance 05. That's probably my favorite Hell in a Cell match of all time. It reminded me a lot of that with the blood and whatnot. Awesome stuff. His second question, say his name and he appears. Do you see Joe Hendry becoming TNA World Champion? I do. He's getting the shot at Slammiversary in a couple of weeks at the end of the month on October 26th. I know that because I'm going to a wedding that day, so I might be watching the show live. I think the wedding's earlier on, I don't remember, but yeah, so he's getting the shot against Nick Nemeth that night at Bound for Glory. I think he does become champion, as he should. So yeah, Joe Hendry, next TNA World Champion. And for everyone that said, we should have won it in June or July, it's Slammiversary, I feel like that would have been too quick. They've given him a nice build since then. The stuff in NXT and some of the stuff he's done in TNA. He's been built up nicely, so I feel like he's in the right place at the right time to win it on their biggest stage. So yeah, I feel like Joe Hendry should become... I always kind of felt like he would win the title by Bound for Glory, and he probably is, so I'm in full favor of that. Next question. Who do you think took out you said, do you think took out Taz kayfabe only? I think you mean, who do you think took out Taz kayfabe only? My first thought when I saw the angle when they said that Taz got attacked in the parking lot, my first thought was the Hurt Syndicate. But It seems like after I heard more people talk about it, Christian Cage would make the most sense. Because he has like the whole dad issue thing, like, oh, your father, blah, blah, blah. I feel like Christian feuding with Hook would make a lot of sense. I mean, I kind of felt that way a while ago, but now they're finally doing the feud. I thought they would do it over the TNT title. This wouldn't be over a championship, but I feel like that would be a nice use of Christian, a nice use of Hook. Hopefully it doesn't go on for 6 months like the Jericho feud did. That was fucking terrible. But yeah, the Hurt Syndicate would make sense, but I think Bobby and those guys would fucking crush Hook, so that might not work out too well for Hook. But yeah, probably Christian would be my answer. At Reborn again, John Ritland from the Twitter machine and on YouTube, Real Honesty with John Ritland does great work. Check it out. His first question was, Dynamite tonight, or on Tuesday night when he sent it in, is being run in Spokane, Washington, 5 hours from me, and no, I'm not going. That's what he said. Where it's maybe going to have 2,500 people in a 12,000 capacity building. I know it's been discussed before, but the fuck is Tony Khan doing? This is their Spokane debut, by the way. Listen, I think they would benefit from doing what NXT did on Tuesday, and WWE also, that was not intentional. They were going to run a bigger building and sold fuck all for tickets. So them running a smaller building really benefited the show and benefited them greatly. So with their Spokane show, AEW, they could also benefit from running smaller buildings. In the past they have, like with Collision they have. For Dynamite they should do the same thing. Running 12,000 people buildings and only fitting in 2,500, maybe 3,000 people is fucking embarrassing. It sounds empty. Just acoustics-wise, it sounds awful. So, yeah, I mean, I would just switch it up for that alone. But yeah, that's I don't know what the final attendance ended up being, but that's not good. That's not good. His next question was, what are your expectations for Wrestle Dream this Saturday? I will be going even though it's in Tacoma, which is a tough sell for a wrestling show. Well, enjoy, John. I hope you have a good time like you were there last year as well, I believe. Yeah, I think it'll be a good show. I am honestly a lot less hyped for this show than I was probably any of their other recent shows. Like, the build for this show has been weak as fuck. The Danielson-Moxley match makes sense. I really hope Moxley doesn't win. I don't need to see him as champion again. I don't want to see Danielson end his full-time active career to Moxley. No thanks. I'm looking forward to the Ricochet, Takeshita, and Ospreay match. I mean, there's other matches on the show I'm looking forward to. Willow and Mariah May I think will be good. I just don't really, I don't know. I'm not really excited for the show. It will be the first AEW pay-per-view since, God, I don't know. I've watched all their shows live, I believe, this year. I watched All Out live. I watched All In live. I watched Forbidden Door live, Double or Nothing live. I watched Dynasty live, Revolution live, Full Gear last year live. I was at World's End. Wrestle Dream I watched live. All Out I watched live. All In I watched live last year. How far are we going back here? I have not watched an AEW pay-per-view live probably since Double or Nothing last year. I did not watch that show because I was at the NXT Battleground show that night in Mass. So I can't watch Wrestle Dream on Saturday, not because I don't want to, but because I'll be at a comedy show with Alexis, so I'll be watching it on Sunday. I miss Bad Blood, now I'm missing Wrestle Dream too. So I don't discriminate between companies. But yeah, I think it'll be a good show. I mean, their pay-per-views are always good to great. It's not often they have like a dull show. I think this could end up being one of their weaker shows compared to the last couple of pay-per-views that I thought were really, really good. But I just don't think the hype level is there for this show. I think the build has been weak. The last couple of special shows they've done on Grand Slam and the anniversary show and even last night's show were all just dull. I just didn't really give a fuck. They just weren't really overly exciting. I think they've gotten progressively worse, actually, by the week. And Wrestle Dream hopefully is good, but it just doesn't really feel like the hype level is there right now. And his last question, non-wrestling related, so Joker 2 lived down to your expectations too, huh? I sure hated it myself. Side note, I'm at 243 movies for 2024. Joker 2 was just such a disappointment. And it's not even as if like I was overly excited anyway. I said this, we already talked about this, but I wasn't excited for the musical aspect alone. And it's not just because it's a musical. I just didn't really think it would fit well after what we saw in the first film. If it was a standalone musical, then maybe. But it wasn't. I mean, if you watch the first movie, it was anything but a musical. And there were musical aspects, I get it, with him walking down the stairs, but them fully delving into the musical aspect, it sounded fucking stupid. And not only was it not a good movie, it wasn't even a good musical. Like, it would be one thing if it was a great musical. The music wasn't even that good. Yeah, it's just, I've seen worse movies this year than that. But I think what made it so bad was that people had so much hype, and like the first movie was so good, it felt like a completely different movie. Story-wise, execution-wise, the ending sucked. Just the whole thing was just not good. It was not good. It was really, really disappointing. So, and again, that was coming from someone that wasn't really overly hyped. Like, I already kind of tempered my expectations knowing it wouldn't be great, but I was expecting it to at least be decent. It was bad. It was a bad movie. So, yeah, it was, if you want to watch it to see what I'm talking about, go right ahead. I would not give that movie any more of my money by seeing it again by any means. I would just wait till it hits streaming. But, yeah, if you enjoyed the first one, you probably will not like this one. I would be very surprised if you did. There are some people who did like it, but I feel like the negative criticism it's getting, and sometimes it's unjustified, this one's justified. Trust me. At Colin_McAndrew, has CM Punk become the thing that he hated, a part-timer? I'm okay with it, but it's a bit hypocritical. Yeah, it just kind of goes back to, the old adage of be careful what you wish for, be careful what you say. John Cena was a big hypocrite in that sense too. Not exactly with that, but like Cena was saying, oh, you barely come back, and this is what you loved, and why did you leave for Hollywood? And guess what? He did the exact same fucking thing. And he has come out many, 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 many times saying that he regrets saying that. Punk, I don't think, is as vulnerable to admit that he was wrong. I don't know if Punk, like, intrinsically, that's the word I was looking for, hates the idea of part-timers. He just, I guess, I don't know. We don't really, and I guess he's talked about it in podcasts, but just the idea that these people would work hard and then he would get his spot taken from him by The Rock. Punk hasn't done that yet, necessarily. Like, I feel like this question would be more fitting if there was this really hot organic storyline and then Punk came in and took that person's main event. That was actually, well, technically that was going to happen at WrestleMania this year. I think there was a pretty good chance that we would have gotten Rollins and Gunther at Mania if Punk did not come back. If Punk did not come back, it probably would have been Rollins and Gunther winning the World Heavyweight Championship. Maybe Gunther would have lost the world or the IC title before then, I don't know. But that's probably what would have happened, I think. So, with that being said, that would have been pretty hypocritical for Punk to say all those years ago, yeah, I hate when part-timers come back, and I've been here all year, and this person comes back, and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he fucking did. Like you said, I'm okay with it myself. I love Punk. I love what he's doing right now, but you gotta be careful what you say. And I think there's a lot less people that feel that way now, or at least say that publicly, or are as outward about it, because if you're a big enough star, you too will end up in that spot at some point down the road. And they pay their dues earlier on in their career. If it doesn't make sense for that person to main event, then sure. But if it does, like The Rock, even back in 2011 through 2013, was a pretty big fucking star, that was a bigger money match to put him in the main event than CM Punk at that point. That's just a fact. It sucked for Punk, but Cena and Rock made for the biggest WrestleMania buy rate of all time at WrestleMania 28. Not Punk. John Cena and The Rock. Again, it sucks timing-wise. It's a shitty circumstance, but it's just terrible timing for Punk. If Punk got hot like a couple years later or a couple years before that, then it may have worked out better. But that's just how it worked out. So again, be careful what you ask. Be careful what you criticize, or at least say publicly, because it might come back to bite you 10, 13 years later when you're in the exact same spot. At The Average Grunt, what's a good example of a solid title reign that lasted less than 100 days that first comes to mind? Honestly, the first one that comes to mind is Becky Lynch's NXT Women's Championship run. And not only was it less than 100 days, it was like a fucking month and a half. It was like mid-September when she won the championship, and she lost it by late October. But in that time, she took the title to Raw. She defended it on NXT. I think she had matches with who? Kiana James, Tegan Knox. Did she defend the championship against Xia Li? I think I don't know if they had a match for the championship, but they did have a feud when she was the NXT Women's Champion. I know she had matches, I think with Indy Hartwell even. I think she faced Indy Hartwell for the championship on Raw. I know she faced Tegan Knox. I think Kiana James on TV. She had a couple TV matches. Obviously, she retained it in that main event of No Mercy against Tiffany Stratton. And then she elevated the title and elevated Lyra by losing the championship to her at the Halloween Havoc show in late October. So that was only like a month and a half, but I thought she did a great job as the NXT Women's Champion for as long as it lasted. I'm sure there's other examples from the main roster specifically in other companies and whatnot. Like there's been so many title reigns that it's hard to kind of think about it without looking it up. But honestly, the first one that comes to mind is that Becky Lynch NXT Women's Championship run from late 2023 that was really affected despite being brief. At Millennial Noob _Noob, new name, his question was, what surprises are we expecting at Wrestle Dream this weekend? Will Bobby Lashley show up as the leader of the Hurt Syndicate? Will we see Shane McMahon show up and join Jon Moxley's group during the world title match? I don't know how many surprises we're going to get. I just feel like they've had a lot of surprises and big shows lately on TV. I don't know how many surprises they can actually deliver on Saturday. I feel like we could get a new world champion. I fucking hope not, but I feel like that could happen. I do think there's a pretty big chance Bobby Lashley shows up at Wrestle Dream. I mean, they've already delivered on MVP. Shelton Benjamin's there as well. I feel like Saturday, Swerve coming out saying no, and then Bobby popping up and laying out Swerve. They could drag it out even more than that over the next couple of weeks, but having him debut on pay-per-view, I feel like would make the most sense, given the story they're telling. So I feel like Bobby showing up is pretty likely. The Shane thing, I fucking hope not. I've heard from people that would know that it probably isn't Shane, that like the credible rumor is that it's not Shane. And it's got to be something. I mean, they got to pay off this storyline in a big way. Shane would be a big payoff. I just fucking hope it's not Shane. That would be fucking awful. If it's the other person that John had DM'd me about, I still don't really care, but it's better than Shane McMahon. So I don't think, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say we don't see Shane. Because when I've heard from like the credible sources that it wouldn't be him, then I'm starting to doubt like the idea that it could be him. Thankfully, hopefully it won't be. Hopefully those people aren't just saying that to make it a bigger surprise if he does show up. That would be just terrible. So no thanks. Last two questions from @BillMeister88. His first question was, he says, "Hi Graham, really intrigued how Bleacher Report works for you in terms of content. I see someone reports on the shows. Do you guys decide who does that, or do you all have specific roles?" That's a good question. So yes and no, we do have all specific roles. There are certain people that do the live coverage. There are certain people who do the post-pay-per-view coverage. The pre-pay-per-view coverage, and like, when I say post-pay-per-view coverage, I'm talking like right as the pay-per-view's over. So like, I've done a fair amount of that. I've actually done more of that in recent years. I didn't really start out doing that, but I've gotten a lot more experience doing that, and I enjoy it. You really have to like pay attention to the shows and work and write while you're watching the shows. I mean, I do that anyway, but more so for like a big pay-per-view, because you really have to get it out soon after the show's over. And that's what I do at a lot of these pay-per-views that I go to, specifically WrestleMania. In the last couple of years, I'm writing and working, and also trying to pay attention to the show as much as I can, because I have to have something to write about, obviously, while WrestleMania is going on, to get it out as soon as possible. And most of the time, honestly, it's tough because I go to the post-pay-per-view press conferences that we talked about earlier. So if I'm working on an article with someone else, I mean, usually it's on my own, but like at Mania this year with one of my coworkers, we kind of split the duties where I did half of the matches, he did the other half, and we would go like every other match. So then like he did the main event because he didn't go to the press conference, I did. So he published the article when I was in the press conference, and I did all my work. Like I literally sent him my shit and then like ran to the press conference, because we had to go to the press conference during the main event, or like as soon as it was over or whatever. I didn't have time to write after Cody won. As soon as the bell hit 3, I had to get out of there. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. It's different though. With certain pay-per-views, certain people aren't available, they're away, obviously, like any job, obviously. So then other people will step up. So I don't really do the live coverage necessarily. Like while I'm watching, if I'm not at the show, typically I don't do the live coverage. Typically I'll do, as soon as the show's over, the post-pay-per-view coverage, the next day coverage, staying up late to work on that. I do that most of the time. When it comes to pay-per-views and the shows like Raw and SmackDown and stuff like that. As far as like other non-pay-per-view periods, as far as like reporting on the shows and stuff like that, I mean, we are assigned certain roles, but it really is very flexible. If someone else wants to do it, we can switch it up. Usually it is the same person. The same guy typically does like the grades for each Raw and SmackDown, or is assigned to Raw, someone's assigned to SmackDown, someone's assigned to Dynamite. I don't really, like I said, I don't do the live coverage for BR because that's a whole other fucking beast. I feel like I would be terrible at that anyway. I can do other aspects of it, but that specifically, watching from home and doing that sort of thing, it's difficult. But Normally the same people do that sort of stuff, but everything else as far as like discussing what we just saw or putting this out right after the show or right before the show or whatever, that is really all very flexible. We all kind of, decide who does what. And sometimes I'm assigned certain things 90% of the time, probably 95% of the time. I come up with my own angles, all my own ideas. I don't really write anything I don't believe in. Sometimes if someone wants me to write something or promote something, I will. I'll help them promote it and whatever. And, that's a task I'll take on and I'll do that assignment. But most of the time, what you see me write and what you see me talk about and shit is all my own ideas and all my own doing. And I'll help, they'll come up with certain ideas that we can sign up for. If I see an idea like on the doc or whatever to be like, why Bobby Lashley will really help AEW. I didn't come up with the idea, but I'm thinking, okay, that's something I can write about. That's a great idea. I'll sign up for that and write about that. And that is something I believe in. I'm not just going to write about it just because it's there. I'm going to write about it because it's something I want to do. And if it's not that, I'll see what else is out there and available. I'll pitch my own ideas. Again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I feel like everyone else in the team kind of works the same way. And it's been that way for a long time. And it's a system that works great. We have an amazing team at BR. A lot of the guys that are there have been there for a long time, as I have been. I've been doing Bleacher Report for 14 years now, since I was fucking 14 years old, actually. Doc, Chris Mueller's a great dude. He's been here on the channel a lot, with the Marvel podcast in years past. I think he might be the only one that's been there longer than I am, but Donnie Wood, great dude. Eric Beeston, great dude. Phil Lindsay's awesome. Had the chance to meet all these guys at different points. Everyone on the team is awesome, so check out their work, check out our work. I'm shamelessly plugging your site, but I feel like we do it honestly better than anyone else. That's just my own opinion as far as the coverage goes, how we write about things, not making it like salacious or like headline grabbing. Sometimes we have some of that stuff, very rarely. But most of the time it's not clickbaity. It doesn't feel fake. It's actual great, first of all, great writing. But like the consistency of our team and the accuracy and just the reputation, I feel like we do it better than anyone. Whether it be a wrestling outlet, news outlet, sports outlet. I can't speak to all the other sections of the site, but for wrestling specifically, I feel like we do it best. I'm biased, obviously. And last question here. Obviously, the big talking point, also from Bill, by the way. Obviously, the big talking point from Bad Blood was about The Rock returning. Where do you see this group going now, and how do you see Jey Uso fitting into all of it, if at all, considering he's on his hot run as Intercontinental Champ? We saw on Monday, you guys were asking me last week, does Braun Breaker turn babyface? Does he face Gunther at Mania? That could still happen ultimately, him and Gunther at Mania. But I said I think there is a chance that it could be a red herring, because I would not turn Braun babyface right now, and sure enough, he came back out on Raw this week and laid out Jey Uso. I feel like that was always the plan. I don't think anything changed. I think they wanted to make you think that he was a babyface, and he came right back around and attacked Jey Uso. It would have been way too easy for him to attack Jey last week, but they waited a week and he attacked him there, so I thought that was great. I think Braun's getting that belt back. Jey Uso, he could wrap up his run as champion within the next month and then be bloodline bound soon after, so Jey Uso could factor into some of it, and I think he should. He is an OG member of the bloodline, so it would make sense. As far as The Rock goes and his role and everything, I feel like it would make the most sense to just have Rock lead the current bloodline. I don't know if he would be the new tribal chief or whatever. I know Solo Sikoa calls himself the tribal chief. I would say ditch Solo, but it's like if you're just left with Rock, the Tongans, and Jacob Fatu, I guess that could work. I'm just thinking now, I guess that could work. I don't know if Sami Zayn, I was hoping he would be a part of it, but he's not like bloodline. He was a big part of the bloodline, but he's not like the bloodline, if that makes sense. He was just an entertaining part of it. He was just kind of the honorary Uso, as they say. I guess it could be Roman, the Usos, and Solo coming crawling back to Roman, versus Rock and the Tongans and Jacob Fatu. But Rock's not going to wrestle in fucking War Games, so, I'm not really sure. I just feel like Rock will be aligned with Solo's group ultimately. He'll tease like being friends with Roman, but ultimately it's like, hey, listen, you left. I'm the real tribal chief. I never really acknowledged you. Fuck you. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of ways you can go with it. That's what I would do. I do think Jey Uso will factor in. I don't think it'll be like next week. He would. He doesn't necessarily have to lose the IC title first. He can play double duty. But I feel like at some point, if you really want to do Bloodline versus Bloodline, Jey Uso's got to factor in. Jimmy Uso's back now. We got Roman back. They need Jey. And I don't know if Roman and Jay are technically signed to SmackDown. They could go to Raw to go to, convince him to come over to SmackDown. They definitely could. I mean, they were not drafted. Roman said he wanted to be a free agent or whatever. He went undrafted. And Jey Uso or Jimmy Uso wasn't around. So Jey Uso just willingly going to SmackDown, just ignoring the brand split would be stupid. I mean, it could work, though, if Roman and Jimmy go to Raw first to recruit him, and then they work something out with Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce to make it happen. So I feel like it's inevitable, and it probably will happen, regardless of whether Jey Uso's champion or not, but I get the feeling he probably will not be champion for much longer, based on what we saw on Monday night. And that's going to do it, guys, for a very lengthy edition of #AskGSM here today. You guys got a lot of great questions. What can I say? I love to talk. I love to answer your great questions. What can I say? But that was it for episode 567, October 9th, 2024. If you want to send in a question to the show for next week's episode or any episode, tweet me on the Twitter machine, on X, as they say, at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop your question on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. One more shout out as well, like I said at the start of the episode, buy your all new WrestleRant shirt today. The link will be at the top of the video of the description box for this video. We have our first design up celebrating the WrestleRant brand. I mean, we have a lot of different anniversaries. Yesterday was the 11-year anniversary of WrestleRant Radio. But I've been doing the WrestleRant name started in 2011, but I've been doing the WrestleRant website, which was previously Next Era Wrestling, since 2010. So a lot of different anniversaries and numbers. The bottom line is we've been doing this for a long fucking time. Appreciate you guys being along for the ride. Would not be able to do it without you. So support the show, support the brand, support what I do by buying a shirt today. ProWrestlingTees.com/WrestleRant. The link should be down below in the description box, like I said. And thank you guys so much. Hope to have more designs coming soon to the store. The link is also available on the website, WrestleRant.com, at the top of the page. Just click on store, and you'll be directed right to the store on Pro Wrestling Tees. So with all that being said, folks, have an awesome rest of your week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.